know, I mean, right sector, Savalda, do you like these kinds of people? I mean, they seem to represent this mob that you can see with live pictures from multiple sources. I mean, are these Jeffersonian Democrats now?
Well, let's start with this. The Yanukovych government sent troops to kill people in November and beat students up. So the ones who resorted to violence were not the right sector at all. It was the Yanukovych regime back in November.
Ariel, can you answer my question? I asked you a different question.
Yeah,
do you like dealing with Savalda? Do you like dealing with right sector? Go ahead.
Peter, I am the first one to denounce the anti-Semites and the Nazi sympathizers anywhere, including in Russia, by the way. But the ones who resorted to violence, the ones who pretended to reach out to the moderate opposition and then did not do what they promised. They did not pass a legislation that they promised to pass about changing the Constitution.
Well, I mean, why should a mob of people be out in the street saying change the law? Why don't you have an election cycle? That's what normal countries do. This opposition wants to change the government. A government was elected, a president was elected, the parliament was elected. Brussels gave it I'm making sure our viewers understand reality, because I agree with what Marcus had to say. There's a huge distortion here. Robert, okay, let's go to our third guest. Let's go to our third guest first. Before we go back to you, go ahead, Robert. Give me your take on what's going on here, because this is a very serious event playing out in camp right now.
The situation is being whipped up by the European Union and the United States of America with the aim of destabilising the Ukraine and trying to play some zero-sum game where they hope to eliminate Russian influence within that country. It is a political game that's being employed by Western powers that are causing a great deal of havoc on the streets of Ukraine and pushing the country towards a very, very dangerous situation that will not end well. There is serious meddling, Western meddling in that country, and it must stop. The European leaders, the United States of America, should respect the government of Yanukovych. There's an election next year. If the people don't like him, they can vote him out. Of course, the danger is that they probably won't.
People clearly don't like him.
Support Yanukovych.
Okay.
He's being totally whipped up.
It's not a popularity contest. I mean, if Mr. Obama has 30% or 33% popularity in the United States, and no one's asking him to leave, at least yet. Marcus, let's go back to you here. I mean, this is what it gets down to. We know that Victoria Nuland has spent about $5 billion on this investment here. Is this a good return?
Well, the whole idea, which is being spun at the moment by the West, that what's happening in Ukraine is a matter of freedom versus tyranny, that's absolute nonsense. And of course, Victoria Nuland's comments last week actually demonstrate that America and the European Union are playing a game of chess. And it's a geostrategic game of chess they're playing in Ukraine. And this has been going on since the 1990s. The West is trying to encircle Russia on its western borders by bringing in state after state into the EU and into NATO. Let me just say this to anyone who argues that this is a matter of freedom versus tyranny. In a tyranny, people don't take to the streets, let alone kill police officers. This wouldn't happen in Saudi Arabia, which America is a staunch supporter of.
Okay, Ariel, would you like to reply to that? Go ahead. Fair time.
Yeah, of course. I was born in Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine. I'm Jewish. I despise the Nazis and the neo-Nazis anywhere in Europe. And unfortunately, there are lots of them everywhere these days. But the majority of people who demonstrated, I'm not talking about the violent fringe. Clearly there's a violent fringe there. But the majority of younger, educated Ukrainians, including in the South... Okay, you're interrupting me. You're interrupting me. Excuse me. I sat there patiently.
Let Ariel continue.
Okay, I sat there patiently and listened. Okay, so please. The majority of people who are demonstrating against Yanukovych are young, educated, Western-oriented people who want to live in a country that doesn't have as much corruption as Yanukovych's regime bred, and Yanukovych totally lost support of the majority of the population. And what he needed to do was to arrange a political transition with the opposition so that sometime late spring, early summer, they have an election, including presidential election, and they change the constitution. And it is ludicrous to blame the West.
I'm sorry, Ariel, what you're saying is ludicrous too, because is he trying to, and I'm going to address this to Marcus now, he's arranging all of this so he can be thrown out of power. I don't get it, okay? He's elected, he's going to stay. I'm going to go to Marcus now. Okay, equal time here. This is what it's all about here, is that the EU and the United States, depending on which gambit, they want to force their hand now. It's a $5 billion investment. They got to make their move now, because there will be an election if they keep to their schedule, and it might not turn out the way they want, because Eastern Ukraine, more populous, is not for this agenda of the EU. That's why Yanukovych rejected the association agreement. So this is the chess game you're talking about. They're running out of time. Go ahead.
President Yanukovych took a decision last November to pursue closer economic relations with Russia, and he has every right to do that. Like in Britain, David Cameron wants a reformed relationship with the European Union. He has a mandate from the British people, and that should be accepted. People in Kiev have the right to protest against President Yanukovych's decision last year, but he is the democratically elected president. And let's not forget, in 2010, when he won that presidential election, that was recognised by the EU, recognised by the US. They've been negotiating with him for the last 4 years. But because he chose to pursue closer relations with Russia, all of a sudden he becomes a tyrant, he becomes a thoroughly wicked piece of work. We've seen this for the last 20 years. We've seen every single government in the world which is in a geostrategic location and pursues an independent foreign policy. We've seen that government demonised. We saw that with the Serbs. We're seeing that in Syria at the moment, and now we're seeing that in Ukraine. It's an intolerable situation, and it's a very dangerous situation.
Robert, how do you feel about this? Have equal time for all guests on the program. Robert, how do you feel about the European Union's approach towards Ukraine? Because when it rejected this association agreement, because it was a bad deal, by the way, it would push the country even into a deeper recession than it is now. So that kind of austerity wasn't. Now the EU turns around and says, you're not a legitimate figure to deal with. But you know what? They're in Kiev right now negotiating with Mr. Yanukovych. Why are they talking out of both sides of the mouth at the same time?
Well, the European Union has been bullying the Ukraine. They've been having quota restrictions on Ukrainian exports to the European Union, which is hurting their economy. The EU has not been a friend to Ukraine. The association agreement, if it were to be signed, it would mean the exporting of EU regulations to Ukraine. It would mean the closure of many businesses, because it will mean higher regulation. It will mean businesses have to meet EU standards, including environmental standards, which aren't particularly enforced in the Ukraine at the moment. It will mean job losses. It was a very bad deal. It's been estimated that exporting EU regulations to Ukraine will cost their economy £20 billion a year. 20 billion euros a year, rather. That's how much it would hurt the Ukrainian economy. It's not a good deal. Russia is the main export market for 75%.
Well, the democratically elected government of Ukraine said it was a bad deal. That's plain and simple. All right, gentlemen, we're going to go to a short break here. We're going to go to a short break here, and after that